I've spent more than 30 years of my life looking into the eyes of people who think they can outsmart the truth. It started in the Marines, it followed me into the Chicago Police Department, and it sure as hell hasn't left me now that I'm sitting in this chair on my own stage. You see enough of it, you start to develop a sense for it. It's like a smell. It's a certain way someone's eyes dart when you ask a direct question, or the way they try to fill the silence with so many useless details that they hope you'll just stop digging. But I never stop digging. I can't. My job, the way I see it, is to stand in the gap for the person who's being played for a fool. I've seen men and women at their absolute worst. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that a liar is the most dangerous person in the room, because they don't just hurt you, they make you question your own sanity. They gaslight you until you don't know which way is up. And when it comes to something as sacred as a child, as the idea of bringing a new life into this world, my patience goes from thin to non-existent in about half a second. I've seen the real victims of this world. I've seen children who were hurt, parents who were grieving, and people who would give anything to have a family. So when someone stands on my stage and uses a fake pregnancy as a weapon to keep a man from leaving, it's more than just a lie to me. It's a violation of everything I stand for. It's a slap in the face to every person who has actually struggled with loss or infertility. I don't care how much you think you love someone. If the only way you can keep them is by fabricating a human being, then you don't love them. You want to own them. And I'm not going to sit back and watch it happen. I remember walking into the studio this morning and looking at the case file for a woman named Megan and her boyfriend, Chris. On paper, it looked like a mess. But then again, most of the things I deal with are. Chris was a guy who looked like he'd been through a war zone just trying to navigate his own relationship. He was young, hardworking, and he had this look in his eyes, this desperate, hollow look of a man who wanted to believe his girlfriend so badly, but knew in his gut that something was rotting. He told my producers that he had tried to break up with Megan 3 times over the last year. Every single time he packed a bag, every time he reached for the doorknob, she had a new crisis. And the biggest crisis of all, a positive pregnancy test. He showed me the photos she sent him. He showed me the texts. He wanted to be a father more than anything. He told me his own dad wasn't around, and he swore he'd never be that guy. He was staying in a relationship that made him miserable, sleeping on a couch in an apartment where he wasn't wanted, all because he thought there was a baby on the way, but the math wasn't adding up. Megan claimed she was 7 months along, yet there was no doctor's name, no ultrasound photos that weren't lost or blurry, and she wouldn't let him go to a single appointment. She told him the hospital had a strict policy against men in the exam room because of some made-up insurance rule. I've been around the block a few times. I know how hospitals work. I know how life works. And I knew the moment I saw Chris's face that he was being taken for a ride. When Megan walked out onto that stage, she had this defiant air about her. She was wearing a baggy sweatshirt, trying to hide what she claimed was a 7-month baby bump, but she wasn't carrying herself like a pregnant woman. I've seen my wife pregnant. I've seen thousands of pregnant women. There's a way you move, a way you sit, a weight you carry. Megan moved like someone who was hiding a secret, not a child. She sat down, crossed her legs, and immediately started attacking Chris. That's the first sign of a guilty person, the immediate pivot to offense. She started screaming about how he didn't support her, how he was checking out, and how his mother was crazy for doubting her. She tried to make him feel like the villain for even asking to see a medical record. I sat there, leaning back in my chair, just watching her. I let her talk. I let her dig the hole. Because the more a liar talks, the more they trip over the details they haven't thought through yet. She told me she had gone to a clinic in the city, but she couldn't remember the name of it. She told me she had a condition that meant she didn't show much, which is why her stomach looked different every day. I looked at Chris, and I could see the conflict tearing him apart. He wanted to scream at her, but he was afraid. He was afraid that if he pushed too hard and she was telling the truth, he'd be the monster who stressed out the mother of his child. That's exactly what she wanted. She was using his own goodness and his own desire to be a good man as a leash to keep him tied to her. It's one of the lowest things a person can do. I didn't waste any time getting to the heart of it. I looked at her and I asked, Megan, why are you here? She gave me some rehearsed answer about wanting Chris to step up and stop listening to his family. I stopped her right there. I told her, no, you're here because you're a liar. You're here because you think you can come on my show and sell me the same load of garbage you've been selling this man for 7 months. She tried to get indignant. She started the how dare you routine. She tried to act like she was the victim of my aggression. But I've been called worse by better people. I stood up and walked over to her. I wanted to be in her space. I wanted her to feel the weight of the situation. I told her that I had a polygraph test waiting in the back, and I had a medical professional ready to do a simple test. The moment I mentioned the polygraph, the color drained from her face. That always the moment. You see the bravado vanish and the panic set in. She started making excuses about why she couldn't take a polygraph. She said the stress would be bad for the baby. She said her doctor told her not to do anything strenuous. I told her sitting in a chair answering yes or no isn't strenuous, but lying to my face is. I told her that if she was telling the truth, that test would be her best friend. It would prove Chris and his family wrong once and for all. It would give her the support she claimed she wanted. But she didn't want the truth. She wanted the lie to keep working. Chris was sitting there, his head in his hands. I could hear him whispering, just take it, Megan. Please, just take the test and prove them wrong. He was begging her to be honest because the alternative was too painful for him to face. He had already bought a crib. He had already started picking out names. He had spent his savings on baby clothes that were sitting in a closet in an apartment that felt like a prison. I looked at him and I felt a genuine sense of anger on his behalf. This wasn't just a relationship issue. This was emotional abuse. It was a calculated, long-term deception designed to strip a man of his autonomy and force him into a life he didn't choose. And Megan, she just kept spinning. She started crying, but there were no tears. It was that dry, high-pitched wailing that people do when they're trying to generate sympathy, but their body won't cooperate with the act. I've seen it 1,000 times in interrogation rooms. It doesn't move me. It just makes me more determined to get to the end of the story. I told her, Megan, the games are over. You're either going to take that test or you're going to walk off this stage and admit to this man right now that there is no baby. She looked at me with so much hatred in her eyes, and for a second, I thought she might actually try to swing at me, but she didn't. She just sat there, trapped by her own web of deceit, while the clock ticked down on the life she had invented. I've seen women try to use children as anchors before, but this was different. This felt predatory. Most of the time, someone tells a lie in the heat of an argument, they get caught, and they fold. But Megan had been living this lie for the better part of a year. She had created a whole alternate reality, and she was forcing Chris to live in it with her. I looked over at Chris, and I saw a man who was physically vibrating with anxiety. He wanted to believe her so badly because the alternative that the woman he loved had spent months gaslighting him about the existence of his own child was too dark to process. I stood there and I thought about my own kids. I thought about the moment I held them for the first time. To take that hope, that pure instinctual desire to protect and provide, and turn it into a leash, that's not just lying. That's a form of soul-crushing cruelty that most people can't even wrap their heads around. I've dealt with murderers who had more honor than that. At least they didn't pretend to be creating life while they were busy destroying it. I decided it was time to stop the talking and start the revealing. I had a nurse on standby, and I had the results of the background check my team had run on her medical history. I leaned in close to her, ignoring her fake sobs. I told her, Megan, you've got two choices. You can go back there with our nurse right now and let her do a basic exam, or I'm going to read what I have in this folder. And I'm telling you right now, if I open this folder and you've been lying, there is no coming back from it. This is your last exit. This is the last time you get to save a shred of your dignity. She looked at the folder like it was a loaded gun. She started shaking her head, saying she didn't have to prove anything to me. She said it was disrespectful to her unborn child to subject her to this. I've heard that one before, too, the shield of the child. Liars love to hide behind the very thing they're exploiting. I looked at Chris and asked him, Chris, has she ever let you feel the baby move? Has she ever let you touch her stomach without a thick blanket or a heavy sweater in the way? Chris looked up, his eyes red. He took a breath that sounded like it hurt. No, Steve, he said. Every time I try, she says she's too sore. Or she says the baby is sleeping and she doesn't want to wake him. I haven't seen her actual stomach in months. She always changes in the bathroom. She says she's self-conscious about her stretch marks. I look back at Megan, 7 months pregnant, and she's self-conscious about her partner of 3 years seeing her belly. It was the oldest trick in the book. I've seen women stuff pillows. I've seen them use prosthetic bellies they bought off the internet. And I've seen them just gain weight on purpose to sell the illusion. I asked her point blank, Megan, stand up and lift your sweatshirt. If there's a 7-month-old human being in there, let's see it. Prove us all wrong. Make me look like the jerk. I'll apologize on my knees if I'm wrong. The crowd was dead silent. You could hear a pin drop in that studio. Megan didn't move. She just stared at the floor, her knuckles white as she gripped the arms of the chair. That was the moment the shift happened. The air in the room changed from tension to realization. Chris stood up. He didn't scream. He didn't yell. He just walked over to her, his voice trembling. Megan, please, just show me. If you love me, if this is real, just show me. He reached out to touch her side, and she flinched away like he was made of fire. She screamed at him to get away from her. She called him a traitor. It was a pathetic, desperate attempt to regain control through anger, but it was too late. The mask wasn't just slipping, it was falling off in chunks. I stepped between them because I could see Chris was about to break down, and I didn't want him to give her the satisfaction of seeing him fall apart. I opened the folder. I didn't need the nurse. My team had contacted the clinic she claimed to attend. They had no record of her. We checked her social media. We found a deleted post in a forum where she was asking how to make a fake pregnancy test look more authentic. I held up the printout of that forum post. I held it right in front of her face. Is this you, Megan? Megan loves Chris 88? Is that your username? Because this person was asking for tips on how to faking a sonogram image 3 months ago. She tried to say someone hacked her. She tried to say it was a joke she was playing on a friend. The excuses were getting more ridiculous by the second. It's a strange thing to witness a person watching their entire life's work, this massive, elaborate lie, collapse in real time. She looked like a cornered animal. And then she did what all people like her do when they're finally caught with no way out. She stopped crying. She stopped screaming. She just went cold. Her face transformed from a mask of grieving mother to one of pure, icy resentment. She looked at Chris and said, I only did it because you were going to leave me. You were going to walk out on everything we built. I did it for us. I couldn't believe the nerve. For us? I shouted. I was done being the calm observer. You didn't do this for us. You did this for you. You kidnapped this man's life for 7 months. You let him buy a crib for a ghost. You let him tell his mother she was going to be a grandmother. You sat there and watched him work extra shifts at a job he hates to save money for a child that doesn't exist. I was pacing the stage now. This is the part of the job that gets under my skin. People think they could justify any level of evil as long as they call it love. But love doesn't involve psychological warfare. Love doesn't involve lying about the most fundamental thing a human can experience. I looked at Chris, and the poor guy had just collapsed back into his seat. He was staring at the floor, and I knew his mind was rewinding through the last year, replaying every moment, every kick she claimed to feel, every morning sickness episode she faked. He was realizing that every memory he had of the last 7 months was a lie. I turned back to Megan. What's under the shirt, Megan? Is it a pillow? Is it just air? What are you holding on to right now? She didn't answer. She just sat there with that blank, dead stare. I reached out. I didn't touch her. I'm not allowed to do that, but I gestured to the midsection of her baggy clothes. You're a fraud. You're a fake. And the worst part is, you don't even feel bad about it. You're just mad that I caught you. I've seen this sociopathic streak in people before. They don't have remorse for the victim. They only have self-pity for their own failure to maintain the deception. I told her that she was lucky I was just a talk show host and not the police officer I used to be, because in my book, what she did was a crime. It was a theft of time, a theft of emotion, and a theft of a man's right to live his own life. I wanted her to feel the weight of the collective disgust in that room. I wanted her to understand that there was no reset button for this. She had nuked her relationship, her reputation, and her soul, all because she couldn't handle a breakup. I walked over to Chris and put a hand on his shoulder. He was shaking. Chris, I said, my voice low, look at me. He looked up, and I saw a man who had aged 10 years and 10 minutes. This isn't your fault. You're a good man who wanted to be a good father. She saw that goodness in you, and she used it as a weapon. Do you understand that? You weren't stupid for believing her. You were decent. She's the one who's broken, not you. He nodded, but I could tell it hadn't sunk in yet. How do you move on from something like that? How do you ever trust a woman again when the person you shared a bed with looked you in the eye every morning and lied about the heartbeat of your own child? It's a long road back from that kind of betrayal. I've seen people never truly recover. They become cynical, they become hard, and they stop letting people in. And that's the real tragedy here. Megan didn't just lie. She potentially ruined this man's ability to ever have a real family in the future because she poisoned the very idea of it for him. I stood there for a second, just staring at her, waiting for some flicker of humanity to cross her face. But there was nothing. No tears, no I'm sorry, no realization of the wreckage she had caused. She just sat there with that cold, defiant look, like I was the one who had done something wrong by exposing her. That's the thing about people who live a lie this big, they start to believe their own bullshit. They think their reasons justify their actions. She actually thought that keeping Chris was worth destroying his soul. I've seen some cold-blooded people in my time. People have done things I still have nightmares about. But there's a specific kind of chill that comes from someone who can look a person they claim to love in the eye every single day and lie about the existence of a child. It's a level of calculation that borders on the pathological. I turned my attention back to the bump. I told her, Megan, take it out. Whatever you have under that shirt, take it out right now. I'm not moving, and we're not going to another segment until you show this man what you've been making him rub his hand over for the last 3 months. She looked at the audience, looking for a sympathetic face, but she didn't find one. Every person in those seats was looking at her with pure disgust. You could feel the weight of their judgment, and for the first time, she started to look small. Slowly, she reached under the hem of her sweatshirt. The room was so quiet you could hear the fabric rustling. She pulled out a wraparound foam maternity pad, the kind you buy online for theater or for pranking. She dropped it on the floor like it was trash. Seeing that piece of gray foam hit the stage floor, it was one of the most pathetic things I've ever seen. It wasn't even a good fake. It was just a cheap piece of material that she used to simulate a life. Chris made a sound, a choked, guttural sob that broke my heart. He stared at that piece of foam on the floor like it was a corpse. To him, that foam represented the son he thought he was going to have. It represented the late nights he spent worrying about their future, the extra shifts he pulled at the warehouse, the sacrifices he made to make sure Megan was comfortable. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small pair of blue baby socks. He had been carrying them around for weeks. He looked at the socks, then at the foam, then at the woman he thought was his partner. He didn't even have the words. He just dropped the socks and put his face in his hands. That's the reality of a lie. It's not just words. It's the physical, tangible hope of another person that you've turned into garbage. I looked at Megan and I didn't hold back. Do you see him, Megan? Do you see what you've done to him? You didn't just lie about being pregnant. You stole his fatherhood. You let him mourn a child that never existed. You let him build a nursery for a piece of foam. I was shouting now, and I didn't care. I've spent too many years seeing the nice way of handling things fail. Sometimes people need to be hit with the blunt force of the truth. I told her about the women I've met who would give their right arm to be able to carry a child, women who have spent years in clinics, spent every dime they had, and suffered through the heartbreak of real miscarriages. To them, what Megan did was the ultimate sacrilege. She used the miracle of life as a cheap parlor trick to manipulate a man who was too good for her. I didn't want to lose him. Steve, she screamed back, finally showing some emotion, even if it was just selfish anger. He was pulling away. He was listening to his mother. I had to do something to make him stay. I walked right up to the edge of her chair. I didn't give her an inch. You didn't have to do anything, I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. If a man wants to leave, you let him leave. You don't kidnap him. You don't use a fake baby as a pair of handcuffs. That's not love, Megan. That's obsession. That's control. You wanted to own him, and you didn't care how much you hurt him in the process. You're not a girlfriend, you're a captor. I wanted her to feel the ugliness of that word, because that's what she was. She had held Chris hostage in a relationship that died a year ago, using a ghost as her guard dog. I asked her about the sonograms. We had done some digging, and we found out she had downloaded them from a Google image search. I held up the printouts of the images she had sent to Chris's phone. I showed them to the camera. Look at this, I said. This image here, it's been used in 3 different fake pregnancy scams across the country. There's even a watermark in the corner if you look close enough. You didn't even have the decency to find a unique one. You just grabbed the first thing you saw and sent it to him while he was at work, telling him his son was healthy. She didn't even look at the pictures. She just stared at her shoes. The level of laziness in her deception almost made it worse. It showed how little she respected Chris. She thought he was so stupid and so desperate to be a dad that he wouldn't notice a watermark on a sonogram. She counted on his goodness to blind him to her malice. I turned back to Chris. I needed to know the full extent of what she had taken from him. Chris, tell me about the money. My producer said, you've been spending every cent you have on this. He looked up, his face gaunt. I spent about $4,000, Steve, he said, his voice cracking. The crib, the stroller, the clothes. I even put a deposit down on a bigger apartment because I thought we needed the space. I took out a loan. I'm in debt now. I've been eating 1 meal a day for 3 months just to make sure she had prenatal vitamins and special food she said the doctor recommended. I looked at Megan. Where did that money go? Those vitamins, that food. Where did the $4,000 go? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. We all knew. She had been pocketing the cash, spending it on clothes, makeup, and whatever else she wanted while Chris was starving himself for a shadow. This is where the moral line gets drawn in the sand. This isn't just a bad breakup. This is a crime of the heart and a crime of the pocketbook. I told Megan that she was a thief in every sense of the word. She stole his money, she stole his time, and she stole his ability to trust. I've seen people go to jail for far less. I told her that if I were Chris, I'd be at the police station the second I left the studio filing for fraud. But Chris isn't like that. He's a guy who just wanted a family. He's a guy who believed in the person he loved. And that's what makes this so sickening. People like Megan don't target other liars. They target the honest ones. They target the people with big hearts because they know those hearts are easy to break. They use your own virtues against you. I stood in the middle of the stage looking at the two of them, the broken man and the hollow woman. I've been doing this show for a long time, and I've seen some low things, but this one was sticking in my gut. Maybe it's because I know what it's like to want to protect your family. Maybe it's because I've seen the face of real grief, and seeing it fake for profit and control makes my blood boil. I looked at the audience and I could see the same fire in their eyes. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was a reckoning. I told Megan that her time was up. There were no more lies to tell, no more conditions to invent, and no more foam pads to hide behind. She was standing in the naked light of the truth, and it was the ugliest thing I'd seen all year. I've seen a lot of things in my time. I've walked through the aftermath of crimes that would make your skin crawl, but there is a special kind of darkness in a person who can weaponize a family's hope. While I was sitting there looking at that pathetic piece of foam on the floor, I wasn't just thinking about Chris. I was thinking about his mother. Chris had mentioned earlier that his mom had already started knitting blankets. She had already bought a high chair. She was a woman who didn't have much, but she was ready to give everything she had to a grandchild she thought was coming. Megan didn't just lie to her boyfriend. She conducted a psychological operation against an entire family. She sat at their dinner table, ate their food, and watched the grandmother-to-be cry tears of joy, all while knowing she was playing them for fools. That's not just a mistake. That's a level of calculated cruelty that requires you to shut off your conscience entirely. I looked at Megan, and I asked her about those phone calls to Chris's mom. I asked her how she felt hearing that woman's excitement on the other end of the line. You know what she said? She said, "It wasn't my fault she got so excited. I was just trying to keep my relationship together." See, that's the mind of a manipulator. Nothing is ever their fault. They are always the victim of the circumstances they created. I told her right then and there You don't get to use your relationship as an excuse to commit emotional fraud against an old woman. You don't get to build your happiness on the wreckage of other people's lives. I've seen this pattern so many times. The liar thinks that if their intent was to stay together, then the means don't matter. But the means are everything. If your relationship is built on a lie, you don't have a relationship. You have a hostage situation. We brought the polygraph results out. Now, Megan had tried every trick in the book to avoid that chair. She claimed she was too stressed. She claimed the baby that didn't exist, was kicking too hard. She even tried to say she had a heart condition she'd never mentioned before. But eventually, the pressure of the truth became too much, or maybe she just thought she was a good enough liar to beat the machine. A lot of them think that. They think their own belief in their lie will trick the censors. It never does. The body doesn't lie, even when the mouth won't stop. I opened the envelope, and I didn't even have to look at the paper to know what it said. I could see the result written all over her face the moment the examiner walked into the room. Megan, I said, holding the results up so the camera could see the deception indicated stamped in red. You were asked if you were currently pregnant. You said yes. The polygraph determined that was a lie. You were asked if you had ever been pregnant during the duration of your relationship with Chris. You said yes. That was also a lie. You were asked if you had intentionally falsified medical documents to deceive Chris. You said no. And the machine nearly jumped off the table because that was the biggest lie of all. I threw the papers onto the floor next to her fake belly. You didn't just lie once. You lied every second of every day for 200 days. Every time you woke up and put that foam on, you were committing to a new lie. Every time you told them the baby was moving, you were lying. How do you live with yourself? She didn't have an answer. She just sat there, her face hardening into a mask of pure spite. She wasn't sorry she did it. She was just sorry she was sitting on a stage in front of millions of people being told exactly who she was. I turned to Chris. He was looking at the polygraph results like they were a death warrant. Even though he had seen the foam, even though he knew the truth in his gut, seeing it on paper, seeing the scientific proof of the betrayal, it did something to him. It broke the last string of hope he was holding on to. He looked at me and asked, Steve, how could she do this? I loved her. I would have stayed if she just told me she was struggling. Why did it have to be this? I didn't have a comfort food answer for him. I don't believe in sugarcoating things. I told him, Chris, she did it because she's a predator. She saw that you are a man of your word. She saw that you have a sense of duty. And she used that duty to enslave you. She didn't want your love, kid. She wanted your compliance. She wanted to know that no matter how bad she treated you, no matter how much you wanted to leave, she had a get out of jail free card in her pocket. You were a paycheck and a security blanket to her, nothing more. It was harsh, but he needed to hear it. He needed to stop looking at her as the woman he loved and start looking at her as the person who had spent a year of his life trying to destroy him. This is the point where I have to step out of the host role and back into the shoes of the guy who spent years on the streets of Chicago. I've seen what happens when people like Megan are allowed to keep going. They don't stop. They just move on to the next victim. They find another guy with a big heart and a sense of responsibility, and they start the cycle all over again. I looked at the camera, and I spoke directly to anyone out there who might be going through this. I told them that the pregnancy trap is one of the oldest, vilest forms of domestic abuse there is. It's a way to strip a person of their agency. If a woman is really pregnant, she'll have a doctor, she'll have records, she'll have a heartbeat that you can hear. If she's hiding behind privacy and stress, she's hiding a lie. Don't let your desire to be a good father turn you into a victim. I walked back over to Megan. I wanted to make sure she understood that there was no moving on from this on my stage. I told her that she owed Chris every dime of that $4,000 back. I told her she owed his mother an apology that she would probably never be able to give because she wasn't capable of feeling that kind of remorse. You think you're going to walk out of here and find someone else to play this game with? I asked her. Not if I can help it. You're exposed. The world knows what you are now. You're the woman who used a piece of foam to steal a man's life. She tried to get up to walk off, but I stood in her way. I wasn't done with her yet. I wanted her to sit there and feel every ounce of the audience's silence. I wanted her to look at the blue baby socks Chris had dropped on the floor and realized that those socks were for a child she murdered in his mind before he even got to meet him. "You're a coward, Megan," I said, my voice steady but filled with a weight that made her look away. "A real woman, a real mother, she protects life. She doesn't use the idea of life to choke the person she's supposed to care about. You've done something that is morally reprehensible. You've taken the most beautiful thing in the world, the bond between a parent and a child, and you've turned it into a weapon of war. I've dealt with a lot of bad people, but the ones who lie about kids, they're in a category all their own. You need help. You need professional, deep-seated psychological help because what you did isn't just a bad choice, it's a sign of a very dark soul." I looked at the clock. I knew we were coming to the end of the segment, but I didn't want to leave it there. I wanted Chris to have the last word. I walked over to him and helped him up. I told him he didn't have to stay in that room for another second. He looked at Megan one last time. There wasn't love in his eyes anymore. There wasn't even anger. There was just a profound, empty sadness. He realized that the woman he thought he was building a life with never actually existed. She was a character in a play she had written to keep him in his seat. He turned away from her and started walking toward the exit. I followed him, leaving Megan sitting there alone on the stage, surrounded by the evidence of her own deceit. The foam pad, the fake sonograms, the polygraph results, they were the only thing she had left. And that's exactly what she deserved. I walk off the stage, feeling the heat of the studio lights behind me, but the chill of that woman's eyes stays in my bones. People think that when the cameras stop rolling, we just go back to our trailers and forget about it. I can't. I carry these stories home. I think about Chris standing in his apartment tonight, looking at a crib that will never hold a baby. I think about the thousands of men out there who are being lied to right now, who are staying in toxic, miserable situations because they think they're doing the right thing for a child that doesn't even exist. It's a sickness, and it's spreading because people think they can use the internet and a few fake props to hold someone's heart for ransom. I see the crew moving the chairs, clearing the stage for the next guest, but the air still feels heavy with the residue of Megan's lies. She didn't walk off with a sense of shame. She walked off like she was annoyed the show didn't go her way. That's the hardest part of this job, knowing that some people are beyond the reach of a moral compass. They don't have that aha moment where they realize they become the villain of their own story. They just find a new story to tell, a new victim to play, and a new way to avoid the mirror. I've seen it in the precinct, and I see it here. Some people aren't looking for help. They're just looking for a better way to hide. Chris is in the hallway with one of our advocates. He looks lost, like he's forgotten how to breathe without the weight of that lie pressing on his chest. I go over to him, not because it's in the script, but because I want him to know there's still good in the world. I tell him, "Don't let her take your future, Chris. She already took a year of your life and $4,000 of your hard-earned money. Don't give her another day. Don't give her another thought." He nods, but I can see the doubt in his eyes. He's going to have to learn how to trust himself again. He's going to have to realize that his instincts weren't wrong. He knew something was off the whole time, but his heart was just too loud to let him hear the truth. That's the real takeaway from today. Trust your gut. If something feels like a lie, if the pieces don't fit, if you're being kept in the dark about something as sacred as a child, don't wait for a talk show to tell you what you already know. Demand the truth. You deserve a life built on solid ground, not on a pile of foam and downloaded sonograms. Life is too short to be a supporting character in someone else's delusion. I'm going to keep doing this as long as there are people who need a voice, as long as there are liars who think they can hide in the shadows. If you're being played for a fool, stand up. If you're being lied to, walk away. The truth is the only thing that will ever set you free.